Hello and happy Tuesday. Welcome to episode number 6 of the Austin Downbeat. You know how we like to start. We like to start with a little rundown of who's playing where this week, and it covers March 29th, which is today, and goes through April 4th. So tomorrow is March 30th, and Andrea McGee, who is one half of Beat Revival, has a solo project out called Belfast Girl, and she is doing a special event at Dreamland, which is out in Dripping Springs. Fantastic venue. She is not only premiering her new music, but she also did a music video that is doing its live premiere. So go and support Andrea with Belfast Girl over at Dreamland tomorrow, March 30th. April 2nd, 10,000 Maniacs is still around, and they are in our town playing at ACL Live 310. April 3rd, we have Darden Smith, who has a brand new album out called Western Skies. He is at the Paramount, hoping to get him on the show. And then lastly, on April 3rd as well at Stubbs, we have 311 in town playing there. As usual, follow your favorite people, find out where they're playing, and get out there and support them. If you are a musician or a band and you want to be on this rundown and you want me to promote your show, you can message me. My links are in my bios everywhere. I am easy to get a hold of. So reach out and I would love to support you. Today's guest is Bruce Hughes. Bruce is, we talk a lot. I talk a lot with my guests about the fabric of Austin and the community in this music community. And Bruce Hughes is definitely a beautiful thread spun in that fabric of Austin. He is born and raised here. We talk about a lot of things. I think we have about an hour's time together. I had to end the interview at some point, which was very sad. It could have kept going for sure. But we talk about making an album, which he did through the pandemic, and kind of the silver linings that were unexpected through that process. Be sure to, and I will have links and everything available to download his album called Late Night Polaroids. It's very good. I think you will love it just as much as I did. And we talk about the city of Austin, how it's changed. He, obviously being from here, has seen it evolve and put on its city clothes, as he says. We talk about how he met Poi Dog Pondering and how they all came together and how they met. I was interested to know I'm always interested to know how creative people who don't have like a 9-to-5 job, how they structure their days and what's difficult for them, what's easy for them, what systems do they have in place to kind of balance out that creativity. So we talk about that. And then he has a Patreon that's launching at some point in April. And so you'll be sure to keep an eye out for that. And I'll be pushing that as soon as it is open to the public. It's a wonderful conversation. I have never actually been able to sit down and have such an in-depth conversation with him before. So I was genuinely curious and he did not disappoint. So without further ado, Bruce Hughes, enjoy. All right, Bruce Hughes, welcome to the show.
All right, Kat, how are you?
I'm so good. It's nice to have you. I was thinking about you today. I've had your latest record in my ears all day, phone in my back pocket, earbuds in, going about my business all day long, pretty much. And I was thinking, like, you and I have been in the same room a lot. I've seen you play. I've seen you play when you didn't even know I was there. Like Bob Schneider did a show in the Galleria in Bee Cave. And then I was like, that's Bruce Hughes up there. I didn't even know that.
I'm doing another one here. It'll have already happened, I think, once this airs, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're sort of ubiquitous. But my point being is that I've seen you a lot, but I've never really gotten to talk to you, get to know you. So I genuinely have questions. I don't, We
all do.
So pour yourself a drink, people, and get in line. um, so you met my daughter when we
I
were
did.
sitting together at Fastball at the Paramount. And so she did a little research on you today. And she was like,
Oh, wow.
let me see what we can find out. And so I didn't know this. I didn't know that you were born and raised in Austin. One of the few.
I feel like there were a couple of 100,000 at least.
But these days, I feel like it's kind of thinning out. And I have a lot of conversations with people, and the city comes up and how it's changed comes up. So, what's your perspective on that and your relationship with Austin, Texas?
Austin, when I grew up, Austin was, I mean, it's the only town that I knew, right? And it felt like it could be every town. It felt like just a quintessential um, American town. And since I had grandparents in various places in Texas, paternal up in North Texas, farming people,
Mm.
and uh, and then my maternal grandparents, my maternal grandfather was a doctor down in South Texas. I had an opportunity to see the differences in in the giant state of Texas and the really disparate uh, uh, communities that exist here. And I mean, obviously, Austin was like, whew, thank God I live in Austin. There's like this
Yeah.
could be in Dallas, could be in Corpus, could be, up outside of Wichita Falls. There's a lot of places, and don't get me wrong, Texas is lovable and there's lots of beautiful people here. But but to me, it just felt like, oh, I landed in the right place. You know,
What was it? What was it about Austin that like the
it just
frequency matched you?
I think it had a lot to do with the fact that it was the state government. So uh, there's a lot of activity that happens, a lot of intelligent activity that happens in regards to civic duty and governance. Leave all political discussions aside presently, and and even more importantly, it was university town.
Mm.
So there was a lot of youthful energy, a lot of higher education, a lot of my mom was a teacher, my dad was in governance, and so there was just it just felt like there were a lot of people really striving to be better, and also because it was Austin, there was an enormous counterculture scene here,
Mm.
enormous, because it was university and because it was Austin, Texas in the late 60s and then the 70s, and the whole cosmic cowboy scenario had occurred. And then, my older friends were going to Armadillo to see Frank Zappa. And then suddenly I was going to Armadillo to see, bands. And it just seemed, it's like, whoo, other towns have community centers and civic arenas, and we have the Armadillo World Headquarters and the Vulcan Gas Company. This place rocks.
Mm. At that point in your life, had you already discovered music and your love for music and the fact that you decided I'm going to participate in that?
From the age of 9.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So musical family or
Musical
no?
family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both my grandfathers were horn players, semi-professionally, but went on to do their respective things. All of my family still dabble.
Mm. That
Uh,
makes a difference, doesn't it?
it does, but they were also, nobody said, "Oh, you can do this." They all said, "You can do anything you want. Don't choose music. You can honestly do anything that you want. Don't choose entertainment."
And so with little Bruce Hughes' brain, are you a bit of a contrarian and be like, oh, well, now you said it?
Well,
Or
I was really into it, especially after the talent show in 6th grade, and then
mm,
ensuing bands that started to fall together in my early teens, and then the family picked up and moved to Alaska
oh, no way.
to go. Yeah, my dad landed a good job that moved us out of state for a couple of years, and at that point there wasn't the community. It was a completely, and I mean wildly wildly different environment. And I literally just put the brakes on music, continued to play guitar for fun, but never entertained the idea of doing it, and really focused all my attention on school and, and higher knowledge, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you guys eventually left Alaska, came straight back to Austin?
2 years later, moved back to Texas. My dad ended up moving the family to Houston. I was a senior in high school, and at that point, it was just like, no,
No.
no, no, no. I have to go to University of Texas, which was always going to be the thing that I was going to do, and I have to get back to Austin. Still not considering a path in music.
Really?
I came back to study English literature and computer science, and it was 1980, 1981, and suddenly the do-it-yourself scene was hot here, and punk rock had really taken off, and no wave and new wave, and there was just a plethora of bands, and everybody was in a band. And before I knew it, somebody said, "You play bass, can you play with us?" And then I was playing with these guys, and then these guys, and then three bands, and at that point it was like, whew, here I am, I'm in, let's do it.
What did you, I mean, if you just kind of close your eyes and think back to that, like what was it that just you felt when you decided like, yeah, I'm in? Was it just the energy around all of that and just being in that so fully? What did it satisfy inside of you?
uh, well, I had a knack for it, and I love the attention,
Mhm.
and but even more than that, um, there was just a compulsion to get better, and to complete. And I had fallen it wasn't that I had fallen in with somebody, with one group of people that were really going to make it. Is that I fell into a community of people that it was the quintessential English art school, or you know or northeastern states art school, saying, the other thing that we can do besides fine art is musical art, and everybody will come and see that too. And
Mhm.
it seemed like a natural progression. And the community that I fell into was, everybody was just excited to push the boundaries of not only what they could do, but where they could do it, and how, where they could go. And it was super exciting. And I was in my 20s, young 20s, and it really felt like, there was not a more noble thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you chose to do it.
At the same time, Michael Dell was going to UT, and Rick Linklater was getting his start as a director. And there was a lot, there were a lot of people really about to do well. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that I made the wisest decision, but I did make a decision. Uh, and I've had, so far I've had a pretty illustrious run, and I've had just an amazing amount of adventure and fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Where does Poi Dog Pondering fall into the timeline on that? Is that
1987,
okay?
1987. uh I had met Frank and Abra and Sean through mutual friends, at a gathering. It's like an afternoon, and evening, all day feast and
Mhm.
fire kind of thing that we would do in the 80s, because it was a broke down town. I mean, in the summertime, UT would leave, and 100,000 people would leave town, and the town would be, it would be 2/3 full.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
it was sleepy. In the 80s, it was a sleepy time in the summer, and so I ended up meeting those guys at a party, at one of those feasts that we would have, and we still have those,
Mm.
with Poi Dog, and because I'm still playing with those guys, and a handful of other people. We still do gatherings and get together and have big meals, and stay up way too late. It's just kind of the natural thing that we do. So I met Frank and Abra and Sean Coffey, Frank Oral and Abra Moore and Sean Coffey, on their first jaunt through town, and then the history may be a little bit broken, because that era kind of gets mushed together. I think everybody has slightly different ideas of the meeting, but at the time, 1987, I was playing in a band with Jody Denberg and Alejandro Escovedo and Susan Veltz and a handful of other people. We'd put together a band called the Seven Samurai to back Ronnie Lane from the Small Faces, who had just moved to town. And we were playing a show at the Continental Club, and there was a little band opening up for us, and they were called Poidog Pondering. And it was Frank and Abra and Sean. And I absolutely fell in love with those guys, and then went and saw them play at the Art Co-op. They had a show like the other day, and they were just like, why are you here? You know, you're one of the 3 people. You were over at that other thing. And I was like, I don't know what it is that you guys are doing, but I love it. It shouldn't affect me the way that it is, because it was just a time when, you know, when Anthrax was out, you know, heavy metal and hip hop, you know, and all of this stuff. It was real
different.
It was real folky, and it was real joyous. And you know, there's a lot of people with a lot of angst, and so that was refreshing to me as well. And then later on that year in '87, Frank called me up and asked me to come out and be a part of an EP they were putting together for an independent label out of LA. And so I went out to San Francisco and hung out there for a couple of months, and started work on what became the very first Poi Dog record, which we recorded here in Austin at Arlen.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So after that, I realized, number one, the Bay Area had no community like Austin, Texas has musical community. It's very supportive here. I mean, there's a lot of competition, but it's still very supportive. It's like, oh, you guys are playing that show, and we're playing that show. We're going to kick your ass, and you're going to kick our ass. It's going to be great, you know. It was that kind of thing, you know. We're all going to kick each other's ass. We're going to have the best time.
Yeah.
And at the end run, which came up holiday season, I'd been up in Oakland, Emeryville, for about 6 weeks, working on pre-production and playing some shows with Frank and Abra and a handful of people. And finally, I said, hey, I'm going to go home. It's the holidays, family, etc. Also, half the musicians you want to play with live there. Just come back to Austin. We'll just record the record in Austin, and, you know, we'll just do it there. And it was a good idea, because we really built up, you know, the love for Poi Dog Pondering here in Austin in a way I don't think was possible in any other town.
Yeah, because it had that fabric. You know, I just had this conversation when I had Johnny Gowdy on, and I talked to him. He says hello, by the way. I talked to him this morning. Lots of funny stories, I'm sure the two of you have. But it reminds me of the conversations I've had with him, and especially the one I had with him on his episode, is that there is this family fabric in this town. And Johnny's such a big part of that, right? I mean, you obviously are. And so, and you can really see that. It's very, I mean, even though I'm just a kind of an observer of it, just as an observer, you can really see that, that exists, and it's sort of like passed down, you know, like his mom was friends with a whole generation, and then Johnny kind of like got brought in and you know, became that as well. And I love that, the sense of that, and that's still in this town despite rapid changes happening. And, you know, hopefully it kind of contracts and goes back to that a bit. But
I mean, I met Johnny when I think he had just turned 13.
Yeah.
And I looked like I was 13. I was probably 21 or whatever, you know. I was young. And Austin was still a town then. But it's, you know, it's put on its city clothes now, and, you know,
I know
it's struggling with its city clothes, you know.
Uncomfortable, like Easter clothes. stiff shoes and
But but it's hilarious. There's a lot of folks that call Austin home, and they've been here for 24 years, and I still feel like they're in some small way interlopers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I
that's
mean,
all right.
yeah, I get it. I've been here for 9 and it's, time is trippy in general, but I am such I feel like I'm a little different. I'm trying to really like preserve and have these conversations and preserve what's so special about this city and learn about it, like constantly be in a state of learning about the city because I didn't move here because I wanted to be here. I kind of ended up here. And so I kind of had to really learn to love it. And not that that was hard, but, I'm not from here. I didn't know anybody here. And so I will
Well,
say it's, if I'm going to live in Texas, this is definitely, to go back to what you're saying, this is where I want to be.
you're gonna live anywhere in the 5 states that surround Texas. It's like right here, and there are a couple of other spots. I'm not going to name them because I might move to. I'm not going to move
Yeah,
anywhere.
don't publicize them.
No. But
Um,
but Austin's definitely an oasis in the middle of a multi-state cultural
mhm,
desert of sorts.
yeah.
But having said that, Texas is Texas is an incredible musical resource for the world. It's just like almost every day I discover that someone else has a connection. Sylvester Stone, Sly and the Family Stone. His birthday was 2 days ago. Born
Mhm.
in born in Denton, Texas.
Wow.
And it's just like, of course, of course, of course, Sly Stone was born in Denton, Texas, because
Yeah.
if I feel like 90% of the music that has touched me, unless it's, obviously not 90. There's music from Africa and from Europe, South America, from Asia, from all over that I just adore so much. But there's a lot of Texas and a lot of music.
Mhm.
It's crazy,
Mhm.
right? Crazy how strong the musical bone is in this state.
Mhm. Speaking of musical bones, you touched on something about that resonated with you when you met Poi Dog Pondering, and you had something about them being joyous. And it's funny that you said that word because when I listen to a lot of your music, and that is something that word comes to mind. Let's see, what did I write down? Your sound. And I'm just curious kind of how a sound is born. I have some theories. I'm just curious. So let me just tell you what my theory is and my questions are. Um, like your sound to me, I don't know what you hear because it might be different, but groovy, super groovy. And I wonder, does you playing the bass and being a bass player participate in that? You know, like because the bass is such a kind of a groovy instrument,
Well, it can
maybe.
be. But it also, it can be.
It could
It can
also be super straight, right?
be driving. The bass absolutely has shaped the way that I approach music, and I feel like I play other instruments. Uh, Not perhaps as well as I'd like, but good enough to help not only
Yeah.
formulate idea, but to bring them, to full fruition. I love the bass because it marries all of the melodic stuff with
Yes.
all of the rhythmic stuff, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of, it kind of it if done well and done right, it binds it together in a way that makes everything coalesce, cohesive, kind of form a form a bond.
Mhm.
And also that's the stuff that makes me feel good. I really lean into the stuff that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, because like groovy, happy, joy, I feel like that is a consistent thread that runs through your music. And it just is like, at one point I was getting ready and I was in my bathroom and I was like, I would be dancing like this. I was in my bathroom dancing.
Good.
And
then
I was like, if he were on stage playing this for me, like I would probably be up there dancing just like I am here in my bathroom. And I was just wondering, like, when you picture people listening to your music, do you have a picture in your mind? Like, is that kind of what you picture? How it affects you is how you want it to affect other people, you know?
I I I don't operate from an idea of imagining an audience until after, songs have kind of been structured and written and ironed out and put, and then at that point, then I'm seeing if how I feel about it and if it makes me move.
Right.
There's a lot of material that's not like that never sees the light of day, you know.
Mm. Mm.
And it's not that that I'm only letting you see like the sunny side, not the dark side. It's just I feel like with this record, for instance, I think there's a couple of songs that get a lot more esoteric, moody, and even kind of emotionally ambivalent, not really joyous,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, and I kind of felt like I had to include some of that stuff in order to balance out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It, it,
not all good times, Kat.
oh, I know. It's interesting though, like just to kind of figure out and put words to sort of, I mean, it must be interesting for you just to kind of, because I would imagine that art's kind of just coming out of you, right? You're just a conduit. And then it's like you said, it's kind of like once it has a shape and you sort of see and you hammer out, go, okay, this is what it is. This is what it looked like when it was inside of me. Like, it must just be an interesting process to watch and just kind of see then consistently what tends to come out of Bruce Hughes, you know?
Sometimes stuff comes out almost fully formed, but
Mhm.
but rarely. Usually you have to, usually there's a group of chords and a phrase or a melody, da 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 ba, da 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 da, and I go, oh, I should follow that, almost like
Mm.
Alice in Wonderland, White Rabbit. I should
Yeah.
follow that and see where it takes me, and I end up often discovering something that I didn't know I was gonna. I end up finding stuff that I didn't know I was gonna find. I end up
Yeah.
finding places to go, and I had no idea that's where, this thing was gonna end up, either lyrically or musically.
That's so
But
awesome.
but it's songwriting's an odd thing too. It's part of it is compulsion, part of it's habit, and
Hmm.
uh, and part of it is um, almost like poetic discovery. There's if you sit down and have you ever done the artist way where you sit down and write a couple of pages in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I do write every day anyway. So, but I get it. Like,
But you know how you're in that process where you're doing freestyle and you're writing and you're
yeah.
maybe you're doing a diary or a journal or something, and then suddenly you're writing, and then two things come out, and you go, "Oh,
Wow.
wow. Not only was I not planning on writing that, I didn't know that I was planning on saying that. I don't even know where that came from, but that is the whole reason why I was writing in the first place."
Yeah. Yeah. Making room for that, giving permission to just kind of opening up the gates and then seeing and then freeing up this guy in here, the little ego critic, you know,
And
it's a really great exercise.
it's definitely hard. It's hard to get beyond that thing where you're editing before you even begin the process, where the critic is saying, "Nope, you can't say what. You got to, well, should I say which? No, you can't say, but permission is a great word for it. And I go even further, which is I give myself permission to suck.
I was just going to say that. Yes. I sit down and write sometimes. I go, all right, let's see how shitty I can make this.
I give myself permission to make mistakes. I give myself
Yeah.
permission to blindly go to places that I have no right.
Business.
I have no business going to these, and that's where a lot of discovery happens, honestly.
Yes. I
Yeah.
say that's where the gold is.
It
And I really do believe that. Good. So talk to me, what's a typical day like for you? And what habits have you created for yourself creatively? I talked to Miles about this in his episode about just creating a habit and, 15 minutes, give yourself, I can do this for 15 minutes. I can do this for 20 minutes is kind of a really powerful thing. Setting yourself up for success. Like if you want to go for a walk in the morning, wear your jogging pants to bed and put your sneakers by the door and just, set yourself up for success. So creatively, I'm interested in how do you structure your day? Because what's a typical day like for you?
I generally get up way too early, which is somewhere between 8 and 8:30.
That's called sleeping in for this girl. I love that for you though. Okay, go keep going.
But I'm usually not falling asleep until between 2 and 3.
Okay.
And I have a weekly assignment, and I run a songwriting group. So every Wednesday there's a song that should be finished today, as a matter of fact.
Oh, well, you should work on that.
Working on something, and I'll resume working on it when we're done. And so that's one thing, and that I'm always aiming towards during the week. I'll often get up, start drinking coffee, and sit down and write. Sometimes I'll have a guitar and just turn on the little recorder and see what happens. The morning time's great. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the morning. Afternoon is great. There's a lot of stuff that happens right at nightfall. And then my favorite time is midnight. Anywhere between 10 and 2 a.m. There seems to be an enormous amount of discovery. And that's generally when I do a lot of finished work.
Wow.
Late at night, but often I'm preparing for other shows. If I'm preparing for, say, the Resentment show, then I'm working on that for a couple of hours in the afternoon and getting some things that haven't been done recently or a new thing kind of broken in, and learning other people's songs on Mondays, and sometimes on the weekends I'm learning Bob Schneider stuff. He always sends out a massive amount of material to learn, internalize, and then to play. If I'm going on tour, I'm working on that stuff for a couple of weeks before we go out so that I can get up. But and that happened some in the fall. So far this year, nothing, because of the nature of the pandemic. But I feel like everything's opening back up, and so I hope to be able to juggle all of that stuff, from songwriting to continuing to play in Austin as often as I can get away with. And so a typical day usually is me getting up, drinking some coffee, down with a piece of paper and a guitar, and seeing if anything happens. And if it doesn't, then going outside and seeing what's up out there.
Yeah. I do all my writing outside. It's hard for me to write inside. I love sitting outside. It's just,
Bugs.
Is what?
Right now, the next 2 weeks can be okay, but then the bugs.
Oh, I hate these bugs, Bruce. I can't.
Yeah, but if you go to Hawaii, nice aloha shirt, by the way. The bugs are there
I
too.
wore this for you because it's just
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Hawaii. Yeah, no bugs in Hawaii. No bugs in California either.
Oh no, there are bugs in Hawaii.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I used to spend a lot of time there. Maybe I was just too busy. I was always in the water surfing, so there weren't any bugs out there.
Now they have little tiny bugs called box jellyfish in the water.
Oh, I never got any of those. Thank
No?
goodness. No.
It's crazy. I've been stung, and it's one of the wildest experiences of my life. I'm glad to have had it. They're tiny. I mean, they're like the size of of a thumbnail. They're so small, but when they land on you, it feels like an electrical shock. And I'm touching the spot that they stung just because I remember it. My body remembers it. And it was just like a little trail. And then it was just like this intense, but in an undefinable location, feeling of your skin being on fire and then
Oh.
going away and then coming back about once a minute. It's like, ah, 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 ah. And that lasts for a day.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
It is horrible.
Can you now, I know this might be, but like, the remedy is to be peed on. Did we try that?
It is not true. That does
Okay.
not work.
Okay.
But what does work is Adolph's meat tenderizer, and it's because of the papain in it.
Oh,
Papaya,
okay.
papaya enzyme, actually, it's like baking soda. You put it on, it's like, so
Oh,
good. And then it goes away, and it's yeah.
so the takeaway here is
Don't
try
get
not to-
stung.
don't get stung.
Yeah.
I'm surprised because I spent so much time in Maui over a large chunk of time going over there for surf trips, and I don't know how I managed to not be stung. So
I'm glad you surf. That's
yeah,
that takes an overwhelming amount of. Did you surf? Did you learn how to surf when you were young?
I learned how to surf when I moved. So I was born in Pennsylvania,
A
and
lot
then
of
I
surfing there.
no surfing there. Actually, people do. I was born on Lake Erie, like literally on a cliff.
Not a lot of surfing there.
There is surfing. It's horrible, but there technically is. But then I moved to Santa Barbara, and that's where I learned to surf when I was 18. So I'd be in school. I went to school for a bit, and I'd be like checking the surf from English class right up there on the mesa. My board in the car, and be like, okay, I gotta go.
18's good. I mean, at that point, you can develop almost any habit.
Oh yeah. I started longboarding right there at Ledbetter Point. Caught my first wave at La Conchita, a little bit further down from Rincon. And and then I had the opportunity to keep going over to Maui, which was really nice. I'm not a big wave surfer. I just like, waist high, chest high, whatever. But
Big waves are terrifying. I mean,
no,
small waves are terrifying.
yeah. It's really good to be terrified. It's really good. Like one of my first times I pearled, it's 10-foot longboard, pearled, board hit me in the head, you're doing the tumble, and totally took the next season off. I didn't surf like a whole winter season.
Wow.
Because I was a little cocky because I tend to be a little bit of a natural, and I got a little cocky. And that knocked me off a bit, and I was like, all right, cool. So the following summer I got back on and smaller waves and started back up. But it's good to be terrified because then you actually behave appropriately in the ocean. So
yeah, the Pacific is not going to give you any chances.
no, yeah.
And people often forget that a 2-foot wave is actually 4 feet high because it's 2 feet up and it's 2 feet down at the hollow, and so 4-foot wave is 8 feet high, and you get out there and you go, they don't look too bad from shoreline, but you get out into it and it's like
Yeah. And then, going back out through the impact zone, and you're, that you get a real clear picture of how the reality.
But I think it's a great thing to learn. It's a great thing. It's a great experience for living life, because life is like that sometimes. Sometimes you get a sweet little ride. Sometimes you get
Pummeled
on your head. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also transfers really well to snowboarding, which I love. Skiing, I could never actually ski. I think I would get really hurt. But snowboarding, I think just because of the surfing and like finding those edges was really easy. And so it was great. 2 hours drive. I could surf in the morning and snowboard in the afternoon. And yeah, so it was really nice out there to be able to do that and have it be kind of a nice lateral move into the winter time.
Yeah. Just like flying.
Mm-hmm. I don't like flying though. Do you like flying?
I like flying down a mountain, and I like flying across the water.
Okay, yeah, that kind of flying is fine. I don't like the up there flying. Let's talk about this album because
Okay.
we talked a little bit, we referenced it, but it's called Late Night Polaroids. You just put it out at the end of January. And how's it going? And are you getting we talked about COVID feeling like it's releasing a little bit. Is the goal to kind of get out there and start playing off of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I brought a couple of songs in to the Resentments, and that's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a there's a larger body of work I would love to play,
Yeah.
like really specifically.
Mm. Yeah. What are
Uh,
some of the songs that you're looking forward to putting out there in a performance?
from this record,
Mm-hmm.
uh, probably "Live Forever" and "What's Inside Your Head."
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would love to do a big rowdy version of New Moon. I
I
would
was
love
just gonna
to do,
say that.
uh, and I love the guitar driving, uh, 80s weirdness of "You Can't Take It Back" and of um, and "Talk Is Cheap." I love both of those. I don't know how I'd be able to pull off "Little Feather," but "Empress of Borneo" is another one that
Mhm.
would be good. So
It's funny you say that because, again, I listened to Shorty.
yeah,
Uh, um, it's a lot of songs on that, and they're all pretty short. Is that the whole point of it being called Shorty? Okay. See? um, but I did get like this really great, I love the 80s so much because it was right when I was, in those formidable years for me. And there is so much, I mean, not in every song, not all the way through in every song, but you give us enough of that feel here and there that's just so satisfying,
yeah.
for especially for me. I can only speak for myself, but for someone where that kind of 80s piece is like still always wanting to be satiated,
I mean,
I
it's like,
love
but
that you do
remember, I
that.
mean, the 80s were there was an insane amount of incredible and varied music that came out in the 80s, and
Yeah.
it's not Human League.
Right.
It's not Fela Kuti Afrobeat and all of the Talking Heads. It's
Mhm.
not all of the, all of the new wave sound. It's not like all of the Manchester sound from the 80s, which, could be Magazine or could be Joy Division. There was just like such there was such a massive amount of music, and it was so well supported and so well distributed that it was hard not to be affected and to
Mhm.
be inspired by it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you carry that through. Um, so where did you record this album?
Late Night Polaroids was recorded, and primarily some of it was recorded right here in this room,
Oh, there you go. That's
uh,
awesome.
where I have a kind of a it's a home studio, and it's all made of parts from other studios that I've worked with and ran up until about 2003. And then the rest of the primary recording took place at two other studios in town: Satellite Studio in Travis Heights and Ice Cream Factory Studio up in my old neighborhood, which is uh, it's like the Cameron 290 I-35 area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So we recorded all of that stuff, and the record was almost complete in March of 2020, and then the shutdown began. It was like, I'm not
Oh,
done, I'm not done,
oh no.
and was able to kind of schedule some what which felt like terrifyingly isolated and uh, and tragic points of infection, you know, which now in retrospect were probably just as safe as milk. But sessions where I would go into the studio and the engineer would be in the control room, and I'd be in a completely different room with two doors and masks, and
Hmm.
cleaning everything off as we were going, doorknobs and microphones, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then finishing up the record bit by bit, um, up until there was just like a complete shutdown. I feel like everything just kind of the doors locked about midway through April. And at that point, it's like, all right, So there was a little bit of finished work that I did here. And I also was able, because of the shutdown and because it wasn't finished, I was able to reach out to a couple of people, around the country and say, hey, I didn't get a chance to do this. Can you, Carla, can you sing the gospel part on Live Forever? Or Frank, can you play some percussion on What's Inside Your Head? Or, or Dane, can you play organ and clav on Sweet Children? I just send it off to these people around the country, and they would eventually get back to me with stuff that was just like magic, because everybody was stuck at home, and everybody was looking for stuff,
to do.
Yeah, things. So, I ended up getting Charlie Kramsky, who's worked with Fastball, and you mentioned Miles and Fastball, and got him to mix it. I had reached out to a couple of people during the pandemic, and there were a couple of directions I wanted to go in, but Charlie was a good fit because I know him, I love him, and he's in town. And also he said, I want to mix this record. I also just had a baby girl, and I'm going to have to take my time. And I was just like, I love that so much. Because everything was shut down. It's like, and this was in the end of 20 and the beginning of 21. So, literally it would give us time for him to go through the mix process and say, this is what I come up with. And then just to leave it, to move to another one and come back and go, let's make a couple of mix adjustments on this stuff without it being, an overwrought, overthinking kind of a thing. The main point of that was that there was no deadline or ceiling. There was no clock ticking on the wall, which is also a terrifying thing, because if there's no deadline, then when are you finished?
Right.
Because there's a great saying about music and movies is that you never finish, you just run out of money.
Yeah. So you look back on that, and although it probably didn't go the way that you intended at the onset, do you look back? I mean, I see you telling the story, and I feel like there were silver linings kind of just laced all over the place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened, I think, in a more natural way, just with external involvement and the way that we were able to take our time and kind of let the songs show us how they wanted it to be presented, and even up to the artwork, there was some very specific artwork that was going to be part of the whole packaging. And one morning in the summer of 21, I was because we were getting ready to start trying to finish the packaging of it, and I just woke up with the idea. It's like, who has to have a whole lot of tawdry, bizarre Polaroids in their possession is Todd Wolfson. Todd Wolfson's going to have these pictures. And then I had this idea. It came out of nowhere. I don't know, because I hadn't been talking to him, and I called him up and I was like, Toddy, it's Bruce. He goes, what do you want, buddy? I haven't talked to you in like 2 years. How are you? And I was like, I'm doing fine. You have any Polaroids? And he's like, that's so weird.
He's like, open up his trench coat.
I just found 4 boxes of Polaroids and went through them all last week. I have them all organized. Do you want to come over and look? And it was like, I don't even have to look. Just throw them in a pile and start taking pictures of them. And that's kind of where all of the art direction for the record came from.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What a great story for this to be kind of inside of this piece of work, just all that stuff that just kind of happened that you didn't plan on to be
even the ice cream cone. It was going to be a picture of,
right,
but it couldn't be anybody that I knew.
Yeah.
Because that felt, um, it, it didn't feel responsible
Hmm.
somehow, or appropriate. So it could not. So I didn't want there to be any pictures of anyone that I knew, and I made sure that happened, and make sure that nobody was exposing anything that that nobody was going to get upset about it. And but for some reason, that ice cream cone was tucked away. It was like it was an outlier Polaroid that Todd had taken for the cover of a Chronicle like 2 decades ago, and it just kept making
Oh.
its way to the surface. And finally, I was just like, I don't know what it is, but we slid it in, and once we did that and put the whole thing up, it's like,
There
there it
you
is.
go.
Awesome.
I love that. I love that. Well, before we go, I want to make sure we talk about
We
you
going?
have,
We just got
well,
here.
I know. It's amazing how fast time flies. We're going to have to do it again for sure. But I want to make sure we talk about your Patreon, because you have a Patreon coming in April, correct?
I am going to start one up. Yeah.
All right. What's that going to be like for folks?
It is, well, I've written an enormous amount of songs, from songwriter, song game with Bob Schneider,
Mhm.
and then continuing on with that habit, that terrible habit. Um, and what it looks like is there are songs that I've written, composed, completely, recorded, fleshed out, just completely tricked out, that have never been released. They've never seen the light of day, and they wouldn't. There's no way I'm going to have the opportunity to put out hundreds of songs. So I figured that the one way that I could, oops, just fell. I figured the one way that I could make that right is to start a Patreon and make those songs available, and not only release newer songs that I'm working on, and also demos of stuff that have been on previous records, but also songs that will never see the light of day. Because there's a lot of stuff that I was like, I love that song. There is no record that I'm going to put it on.
Mm.
Nobody's
Yeah.
going to listen to me play uh, well, they are going to listen to it because it's going to be part of the Patreon page.
They are going to listen. Yeah.
And I'm slowly getting the page set up, and I hope to have a first week of April release. That's 2 weeks. That's
Awesome.
2 weeks away though. So we'll see.
Yeah, it is. Well, let me know when that goes, and I'll help push that out to folks. 'Cause that's one thing with Patreon, is that you really have to tell people, that you're in there, because when you're in there, it's kind of hard to know who to search for. You know what I mean? So yeah, but I will help spread the word for
I
sure.
appreciate it. I feel like it's easy for all of us to get lost, and it feels like there's a dozen voices that are the loudest ones, and
Uh-huh.
it's difficult to get heard, and that's good. I'm glad that there's a lot of music available, and a lot of people are still, you know, loving the process and loving this the sense of expression, and really changing, the dynamics of what music is these days.
Yeah.
But it's challenging. I feel like it feels like a little bit more work than it was 20 years ago.
I was
And
going to ask you about that.
a lot more work than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would think like this whole, how you put music out has changed, how, the whole social media component of I mean, I just know from even just doing the show, like, good grief, you have to stay in the algorithm and post stupid shit, random. It probably appears to be gratuitous at times, but you have to keep pushing that content out. And if you don't understand that and get that's how it works. I know how I feel about that. Sometimes it feels like it's a whole other job.
I
How
know
does
how I
that
feel
feel
about
for
it.
you?
And I've tried to develop the habit of putting out stuff and let people know about the record for the last couple of months.
Yeah.
But this last week, I have kind of quieted up because of the Russian aggression has been, it's affected me in an extreme and tragic way.
Yeah.
And so it was completely overcome and overwrought with that. And also, so I felt like anything that I did for any sort of self-promotion was cheap and unnecessary. But also there's a lot of noise in Austin, Texas all the time. And this week in particular, there's a lot of racket. But it's also a great time, to let people know. I mean, I saw Jamie Harris at a party last night at Ray Benson's thing, and she didn't even know that the record was out. And she tends to know a lot about what's happening.
Yeah.
So my little feelings were hurt that she didn't know. But you and I both have to get over that idea that, here's what I say. Am I even good enough to have imposter syndrome?
Can we stitch that on a pillow, put it on a hat, put it on a t-shirt?
And then I say, yes, of course I am. I'm good enough to have imposter syndrome. I am good enough to have imposter syndrome.
That's hysterical. I love it. Well, with that, we are going to have to say goodbye until the next time, but you have to come on again.
Okay.
This was a lot of fun. It was really nice to finally get some time to sit with you and talk with you and get to know who you are behind that great head of hair and awesome bass playing skills and seeing you play. So thank you for spending time with me.
Thank you, Kat. I love your show. I went and watched all of the episodes just to get caught up on the scene, and also so that I wouldn't repeat anyone's answers.
Well, I appreciate you watching, and so awesome to have you on. So until next time, we will say goodbye, and that's another episode of the Austin Downbeat. Thank you.
Aloha.